Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I like being the first speaker because everyone is still caffeinated and energized, so that's great. So when I decided to talk about a survival guide for B2B product management, I initially thought to be dramatic and come like dressed as a safari guide, but my wife, who's gratefully more intelligent than I am, advised me against it, so I'm dressed as me today. So today, look at this picture here. This is the lovely African safari. And there are a couple of things you see there. It's really beautiful as a landscape, but you also have lots and lots of dangerous creatures in there, right? So we will, and this looks a lot like the B2B product management space. It's great from the outside, and then on the inside, it gets quite interesting. So this would be set up as a survival guide. Yes, my name is Boma. I have spent the last couple of years working in the B2B, B2C space. I currently work at HelloFresh, where we build today across North America, we build tools that help make our supply chain better. So our core customers are our internal production and manufacturing teams across North America. We ship around 1.2 to 1.4 million boxes every week, and our goal is to ensure we do it with the minimal amount of errors and to satisfy the customer, right? And in my experience, I have worked as a B2B product manager, but I have also worked on like the solution engineering side, where I spent lots of time doing build versus buy scenarios and analysis. And I have also been, which means I have been a client of B2B products, and I have evaluated them, decided which to buy, which not to buy, and who to fire, right? And in this talk, I kind of will draw on that experience to throughout this talk. I am a huge biz and tech nerd, so grab me. Let's talk about Twitter and all the fun stuff happening right now. I try to write a newsletter every now and then, but I have been kind of lazy about it recently. And this is the shortest movie about the life of a product manager. Typically, problems chasing you. If you're a product manager here, how often do you feel like this happens to you? Like once a week, once a month? Now, if you're a B2B product manager, you have a couple of hippos coming at you, and maybe at the end of the road, maybe you have a pack of wild hyenas waiting for you. That's kind of the life of a B2B product manager. So it's interesting, but it's also really difficult. And this is the trail guide to survive that space. Now, I wouldn't be a very good B2B product manager or product manager at all if I didn't negotiate the scope of this conversation with you upfront. So I will be focusing on enterprise B2B product launches, right? So I have abstracted away B2B SaaS because they somewhat behave like B2C solutions in a certain way. Right, so here I'm focusing on core enterprise B2B products, and under there you have B2G, B2B2B, and all of those, right? Now, let's talk about what is a B2B, what's an enterprise B2B product. So think of Fortune 1000 companies, and an enterprise B2B product serves primarily as a platform or an OS in which a value stream in an organization, in a typically large organization, carries out its mandate, right? So if you think about ADP as a HRMS, right? It manages like payroll and all of the functions that the HR team manages. So it's not an end in itself, it's only as useful as the users find it. Right, so that's kind of how B2B enterprise products are delivered, which means as a product manager, you kind of have to think a bit differently because the products you're creating are helping someone else create some other value, right? And I have a couple of other examples of some of the largest companies in the world. The other thing about B2B enterprise products is the buying process resembles a CapEx acquisition decision metrics. So acquiring a B2B product somewhat resembles this. It goes almost through the same step as which a company who's trying to buy a new manufacturing site or buy a new building goes through, right? There are lots and lots of processes, lots of sales conversations, negotiations, and it's typically long. So you have sales cycles of between 6 to 18 months, right? Which makes life a bit difficult for everyone in that process. Wanted to spend some time talking about like the pros and cons of B2B products generally as compared to B2C, which have lots and lots of pros. One interesting advantage of being in the B2B space is you have the opportunity for your revenue to scale almost exponentially. And I'll give an example. So imagine, if you would, you own a B2 or you manage a B2B portfolio for an identity management service, right? And your first client is the government of Qatar. Let's use Qatar, right? Population 3 million, so you have 3 million accounts, right? The next government that you sign up is the government of Canada, and all of a sudden you have 38 more accounts or on your platform, right? Now, only B2B type products scale in that way. So it's more difficult to sell, it's more difficult to manage, but the advantage in there is you can gain huge amounts of growth with few or with shorter sales effort, not sales, let's say marketing, right? Now, with having little marketing efforts, you'd see that your marketing costs are low because typically the average enterprise B2B client company has around maybe less than 1,000 large clients that they serve, right? So your cost of marketing is low. You tend to have low churn because remember that you have a product that's supporting the enterprise, right? So it's a lot more difficult for you to be kicked out of a company. So you have low churn, and then you have predictable revenue, right? Because you have contracts. Typically, you'd have 2-year contracts and all of that. So you can almost count money in the future as receivables, which is a huge advantage for a company. Another advantage, it seems like a disadvantage, but I put it as an advantage, is that the problems with your products are often not sugar-coated. So your clients will tell you exactly how they feel about the features you roll out. And that's a huge gift for a product manager, because in the B2C space, you will spend a lot of time putting out surveys, creating survey monkeys, and like trying to get people to actually tell you what they want, right? But in the B2B space, B2B enterprise space, the client typically has a clear idea of what they want, and they also have a clear idea of when they're not excited about the products that you're offering. Now, in terms of the disadvantages or the cons, you have long sales cycles. There's some information asymmetry because it's difficult for you to figure out what your competitor is doing in a B2B enterprise space, right? You can't just like find a demo or sign up for the product and kind of see what they do, right? So that's a problem, and you kind of have to find ways around that. The other disadvantage that I've put in here, it's sales driven. And we'll talk about some of the advantages. Luckily, the sales guys are in a whole nother room, so I can talk about them. But the disadvantage of being a sales-driven process is you would find the salespeople will promise clients things that don't exist at all. And it's the most ridiculous thing in the world, but it happens, right? And in this talk, I'm hoping to talk about the pragmatic solutions to stuff like this, because irrespective of what you do, it's always going to happen. Now, here's the B2B purchase journey, and it's a lot more complex than a B2C purchase journey. And I'll just call out a couple of key points. The slides are going to be available to download, so you can look at them in more detail later. But you'd find that one of the key things as a product manager that you have to understand in the B2B purchase journey is A, the buyer is not the user. So you might have a VP or a COO who's buying the product, and you have branch managers who use the product. And it's often completely disconnected. Now, the problem with that is you would find as a product person, the requirements don't have a neat way of making their way up to said buyer. So what might excite the buyer and what might help you close the deal might not help you keep the deal going, because when you take those requirements and you create that exact product, it will fall flat on its face. So you have to figure out how to extract those requirements from the people who actually use it. The other problem with the B2B purchase journey is you'd find that someone who has absolutely no use for the product might have a really large impact on whether the deal closes or not. An example would be you have a CRM product that you're selling, but there's the head of privacy and information security. He doesn't care about the features that you have and the product itself. But the problem is, if he has enough concerns, no CEO is going to override the head of IT, at least no reasonable CEO will override the head of security to approve the purchase of a product. So that guy's concerns will affect whether your deal closes or not. Now, why should you care about B2B product management? Survival tip here, the next step in your career might be in B2B. And why I say so is you'd find that B2C products and B2C companies often or eventually try making B2B money. Now, the advantage for you as a product person is this might represent the next step in the evolution of your career. Because guess what? When a company is trying to create a new division, they're going to tap somebody who's inside first, right? And this might represent the next step in your career. So if you're a product leader today, this might represent the next step in your career for you to own a complete division or to have P&L ownership. So B2B products somehow naturally evolve from large B2C companies or C2C companies. So I put up a couple of examples. You see Amazon.com, they have procurement solutions, and they have Amazon Business. They have the famous AWS that basically pays for all of Amazon today. You have Meta that has its workplace, and you have Shopify that's it's a B2B solution, right? But it's a B2B SaaS solution, right? And they target small customers. But then they also have enterprise offerings that target large clients like Staples and Heinz. And you'd find that their requirements are quite different from like Boma's e-commerce store. Therefore, as a product manager, whether you work in the B2C space or you work in the B2B, your company, even if it's a B2C company today, might eventually start exploring B2B opportunities. So it's important for you to kind of understand the dynamics in there and figure out how you might grow from there. Now, if you also have dreams of being a founder, you'd find that B2B companies, because they have lower marketing costs, and they typically, from the beginning, know how they will make money, unlike lots of consumer-facing startups. It's easier to raise money from angel investors. So if you have dreams of being a startup founder, you might want to explore your B2B ideas. Also, you'd find that B2B companies have a higher likelihood of exits via acquisition. So if you also want to be a B2B founder and you want to make that ka-ching, then you might want to consider that. I put in here a graph that shows something that seems somewhat counterintuitive. So you'd find that the number of deals in the travel space, you'd imagine the travel space is a B2C space, right? You'd find that the number of deals for B2B versus B2C products is tending towards 50% over time. And I expect it to continue down this trend because investors will invest more in companies that have less risk, stronger business models, especially in times of economic uncertainty like today. Now, some of the challenges B2B product managers face, and you'd face in B2B product management, I have put a bunch here, but I'll highlight only a few. One is it requires a more diverse range of skills, right? So you'd find that somehow sales would be something you kind of have to do. You have to support sales. You have to support sales enablement. You'd have to do business cases. You'd have to do RFPs in an enterprise scenario, which is something a product manager typically doesn't do, right? And you can choose as a product manager not to do that, but it would also make you a less effective product manager in a B2B scenario. And yeah, so it requires a more diverse range of skills. The other problems that you'll have here is there are many, many more stakeholders. So you have a bunch of stakeholders within a company. You have the buyer, the champions, the users, and people that didn't like the decision that your product was chosen. And you have that times every other company that you work for. And somehow you have to make everybody happy all the time. So you'd find that arguably the largest problem you face in the B2B product management space is stakeholder management, both internal and external. And the last thing I should have put here on this slide is you also face a lot of angst, and you risk losing a lot of hair because it's super frustrating, right? Because you have sales going to commit to things that don't exist. You have external stakeholders who have agreed to that and are not going to move. And you have lots of other companies who have different requirements and different configurations that they're not going to change because, well, they're the clients, right? So all of that comes to a point where you kind of have to approach B2B product management with a lot of humility. And first of all, realize that you're not the CEO of nothing, right? One of the things that you hear in product management is you're the CEO of the product. And I talk to lots of people who want to get into product management, and they say, I love working in product management, or I want to work in product management because I want to be the CEO of my product. And I smile and I look at them, sweet, sweet summer child. So you're not the CEO of anything. You will have to approach it with a lot of humility and recognize that probably you'll do some PM stuff, but most likely your most important job is being an air traffic controller, ensuring that two planes don't run into each other on the tarmac. That's probably going to be your most important job as a B2B PM. You will also find that you'd spend time cleaning up a lot of mess that lots of stakeholders have made around the interactions that they've had. And you'd spend a lot of time doing customer support to ensure that they're able to use your product in the most efficient way. Now, it seems really obvious, and this is probably the most used phrase in all of business, know your customer. But it's really important to know your customer as a B2B product manager. And the first thing, or if you're going to take anything out of this talk, is get out of your ivory tower. First, you're not the CEO. You don't have the influence of the CEO. So get out of your ivory tower and figure out, go to where the rubber meets the road. Go work with your sales folks to attend those sales calls and understand the feedback they're getting. And attend industry conferences to listen, right? Go to industry conferences where your clients go and actually listen to the things that they complain about amongst each other. And also, if you can, listen to support calls. So just go download from the CRM support calls and just like binge them, just like put them in your ears when you're commuting and just listen to support calls. That would give you a lot of information about what your clients are going through. The best B2B products are painkillers and not vitamins. And what that means for you as a product manager is because you're creating products that solve problems, because B2B enterprise products don't just exist because they're cool. Like nobody cares about like your cool AI, blah, 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 chat widgets. It has to solve a real problem for the client or else, yeah, good luck, right? So when you're prioritizing your products and when you're thinking about features, almost write the business case for your clients, right? So think about how will this make my clients more profitable? How will this reduce the errors that they have? How will this help align better to their goals as a business, right? So think about it in that way. The other thing that I talked about is I talked about how stakeholder management is going to be your biggest problem. And honestly, in this case, like that cute 2x2 stakeholder framework where you have like informed and all of that, that's not going to work for a B2B scenario because you have way more stakeholders, right? So I kind of came up with this, and I'd say build a stakeholder dictionary. And it's going to take time, but it's going to help you because it'll help you understand your customer. It'll help you understand your buyers. It'll help you understand all the stakeholders in your ecosystem. And it would also serve as an artifact that you can share with your sales folks, you can share with your product marketing folks, because different stakeholders that you have completely different needs and different requirements and different things that they care about and they fear, right? So I'd say build a stakeholder dictionary for your buying journey, for internal customers, and for business as usual, because your stakeholders change once you close a deal. Actually serve internal customers, right? So I have talked about this, I'll keep talking about it. Get out of your ivory tower. So that's number one. And be a partner to the folk that actually help propagate your product in the industry. Teach sales not to overcommit. And how do you teach sales not to overcommit? One, you kind of have to be, you have to patiently guide and coach them, right? So when you sit in a meeting with them and a client asks for something, you have to kind of show them how to say no tactfully without just like, yes, 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 we can do all. Help them understand the architecture of the product and how the product works to know what's possible and what's not immediately possible. Now, to help you do that, you need to have a high visibility roadmap with the client's needs. Now, why I say so is, as product managers, we often obsess about like the fanciest way to create our roadmap. And there's lots of road mapping software and all of that. And you'd find that you could create your fancy roadmap, but chances are the sales guys probably don't even have access. They don't have licenses to your roadmap tool. So, yeah, good luck, right? So for me, the roadmap is a tool of communication and a tool of alignment, right? And those are the two major roles of a roadmap, right? So if what your salespeople need or what the rest of your organization needs is a roadmap in like a Google Sheet or whatever, just do it and ensure that it's something you share and it's visible and you share it very often, right? So don't wait for people to come to your roadmap, share it with them. And in a B2B enterprise scenario, when you have features, put the clients right beside the features that you have on your roadmap, because that would also help them realize, oh yeah, our biggest client wants this. I can't like go promise something else to somebody else, right? So those are important things that help you manage your internal stakeholders. Be careful with misapplying the value of UX. And in a B2B scenario, if you've ever looked behind like the till at a Walmart or at a Staples, their user interface for the retail POS looks absolutely horrible. And it looks that way for a reason, right? So in a B2B enterprise scenario, there's a cost of switching in your interface. So moving a button from the left to right has a certain cost on operations, on training the people that already use your tool, right? So for example, if I took a doorknob, your doorknob, and I moved it from the left to the right, you would see it every day that it has moved. But I bet in the first 6 months, you will always reach for that phantom doorknob. And that's the same thing that happens when you think about UX. So your goal should be completely aligned with your customer, and they typically care about maximizing efficiency. So they use your tool because they want to complete a task as quick as possible, as painlessly as possible, and all of that. So the value of UX in this case is actually using your UX resources to unearth the process problems that your clients might have at the user level, right? So going beneath what the buyer or the champion says, and that's where you find the value of UX. And I put in a small case study here. So a motor magazine in, I think it's Switzerland, did a study where they gave drivers 4 simple tasks: to change the radio to the most popular station, increase the temperature by 2 degrees, increase the instrumentation light, and one other task that escapes my mind. And they measured the efficiency of that task by how far you drove before you completed those 4 tasks. Now, here's the fun thing that happened. The Volvo, the old car with physical buttons and no fancy touch screens, won by a long mile. It did 3 times better than a Tesla. The Tesla has the magic, like 15-inch display and all of that. But that wasn't, that didn't introduce efficiency to that specific system, right? Or to complete that specific task. And that's what I want you to think about when you're making UX changes, right? So I'll keep going. I talked about your roadmap, right? So to manage your roadmap, here's my recommendation. Have 3 different roadmaps or 3 different tracks in your roadmap. So in your roadmap, have a roadmap that has like for your platform and your vision and the strategic things you want to do as a product manager. Have your implementation roadmap, which has capacity for things that will happen or new clients that will be signed up. You have to plan for that. Then have your like sales excess roadmap. They will promise things that well, you can't go around. You will need to close deals. And I'd say plan that and kind of have that in your roadmap. And when you do that, that would make your life a lot more easier. And finally, when you have all of that done, I'd say build a flaming moat around your product, right? So the barrier to entry is high for B2B enterprise products, but the barrier to exit is also similarly high. So build a moat around your products once you have signed on clients or once you have clients. So integrate into existing technologies if you can. It's more painful for you, but figure out ways to integrate into existing technologies and existing processes in companies that you work with or people that use your products. Because what that will do is when they're unhappy, they'll think about the cost of exit, and they'd rather work with you than go through the pain of replacing your product. And finally, know that product support is a feature in a B2B enterprise scenario. So one of the reasons you most likely will lose a deal in a B2B space after you have onboarded clients is your support wasn't great enough. So think about product support. Think about how you integrate into the support systems in your organizations when you're building new features. Think about the things that can go wrong. Think about opening channels of communications between you and the enterprises that you work for. And hopefully, by doing all of these things, you might and you will successfully navigate the very treacherous wilderness of B2B products and ship better products. Thank you.
It's been
Yes.
I guess I can start. I have.
Okay.
So when it comes to enterprise B2B products, right, and we deal with a lot of large companies, and when us as product managers want to be data-driven in our decision-making process, we deal with a few enterprise clients. How do you take data into sort of helping action your roadmap or features when there's only a few users? And in enterprise, we know each user is quite different from the other companies. So how do you incorporate that into your roadmap?
That's an interesting question. I'll tell you about one experiment that we tried running a while ago. So what we did was we realized that a lot of information is buried in sales notes, right? So meeting notes have like a bunch of information that nobody ever goes back to, but it's in there. So we tried kind of mining data from sales notes. So we tried collecting data from all the sales guys when they shared their meeting notes, and tried running like fancy ML type stuff to extract sentiment and extract keywords. That's probably like a fancy solution, but a shorter solution, I'd say, would be to try to organize what I have called, actually I have a bonus slide that might answer that question. A product council. So what you do there is you get champions from multiple organizations that have similar problems and make them stakeholders and advisors to your product, and share your roadmap with them and get feedback from them. What that does is that smooths out some of the noise, because now you have multiple stakeholders actually from different organizations saying, okay, yeah, this is a problem for us, but maybe this is how we solved it, and all of that. Of course, that might be tricky because you might find that some of your clients are competitors, but it is possible. I have had Pepsi and Coca-Cola in a room before. So yeah, that's what I'll say.
Do you have any more questions? Right?
You talked about separating the roadmap into 3 categories, but I found that once you've done that, building the value proposition for each of those categories becomes very, very difficult, and also trying to measure the capacity. Are there ways that you've found that you can determine where the best or the greatest value is for that development effort?
That's interesting. That's one of the things that makes like road mapping in the enterprise B2B space really difficult, because things happen really quickly. You'll find that sometimes you will have to sacrifice features that you had in your roadmap or that you have in your roadmap to close certain deals, right? So for example, you're about to close a deal with one of the largest banks in Canada, and you're a payments gateway provider, and there's like a feature that you wanted to launch. What I have found is there are 2 things I do in that scenario. A is I take the business case of that deal that we might close, and I go to senior management. I'm like, yeah, we need more engineers, because this is the business case. So if you gave me 3 more contractors for 3 months, like I'll solve this problem and I'll solve this problem. So for scenarios where you have to change your roadmap dramatically to close a deal, which is mostly what breaks your roadmap in enterprise B2B scenarios, I try to use the business case for that deal or that deal that has closed to justify kind of shoehorning extra capacity in my roadmap. It works a lot of times. Sometimes you have to kill some of your like product vision type things to make money.
Cool. Thank you so much, Boma, for your time.
Thank you.